killed this man. Oh my God. They done killed this man. Oh my God, he got to be dead now.
Keeping an eye on the government is critical to keeping the government in its place. But while government loves keeping an eye on us, it hates it when we keep an eye on it. And it's been easier to do so. It makes it more dangerous. More and more citizens are recording their interactions with the police using simple and perfectly legal devices like their cell phones. And the cops don't like that one bit, increasingly resisting the tapings with force and even jail time.
Now there's probably someone who's going to be around with a cell phone camera to take a video and post it on YouTube. And really, I mean, transparency is, I think, half the battle.
This little thing is a weapon against tyranny.
Simon Glick, a Boston lawyer, was arrested in 2007 for using his cell phone video camera to record a man who was being beaten by Boston cops. Bystanders were heard shouting, "You're hurting him!" Glick never interfered or obstructed the police in any way. He was 10 feet away and merely recorded what was occurring in open view before the world.
They work for us, and we deserve to know what they're doing. To that end, police in particular, you know this, we just saw it, have been known to trample the constitutional rights of people all the time. What you have a right to know is that you absolutely can video and audio tape them. The police routinely violate the Constitution when they pull over your car or stop you on the street. They ask you intrusive questions that you don't have to answer. They sometimes even rough people up. They push them off their bicycles. They threaten them with guns. They basically treat you like you're guilty of a crime before you've even been charged or convicted of one. The Constitution protects you from this type of police behavior. And many Americans have realized that policemen, often not caring about the Constitution, need to be photographed. So courageous Americans have decided to video and audio tape their interactions with law enforcement as a way to protect themselves from police mistreatment or to prove what happened. Yet big government is so afraid of people recording the police, it tries to ban the practice. This is completely unconstitutional. The First Amendment guarantees our right to free speech. That includes the right to listen to and record what happens in public. Cameras and recording devices are simply modern-day note-taking. And if people are using them to keep the police honest, to tell the truth about law enforcement abusing rights, then it is the right of the people to record these affronts to the Constitution. For the government to record us is Orwell's 1984 come true. For us to record the government is a public right and a smart thing to do.
The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching! The whole world is watching!
But we begin tonight with a tale of two speeches, both from the same man, both from President Obama. One speech that could have been billed as a ballad to the Constitution, a proclamation of American values, a repudiation of the lawless behavior of the last presidential administration, and another speech announcing a radical new claim of presidential power that is not afforded by the Constitution and that has never been attempted in American history, even by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Remarkably, President Obama today made both of those speeches simultaneously. Standing inside the National Archives in front of the actual original Constitution, President Obama delivered a blistering critique of the Bush administration, in which he called their actions and their legacy literally a mess.
Our government made a series of hasty decisions. Poorly planned, haphazard approach. Too often, we set those principles aside as luxuries that we could no longer afford. Our government made decisions based on fear rather than foresight. The decisions that were made over the last 8 years established an ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable.
An ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable. Ouch. Then, moments later, he announced his own ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism. President Obama today proposed something new, something called prolonged detention. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Prolonged detention. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report? It was based on a Philip K. Dick short story. It came out in 2002. It starred Tom Cruise, remember? He played a police officer in something called the Department of Pre-Crime. Pre-crime is where people are arrested and incarcerated to prevent crimes that they have not yet committed.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubinos. Take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours, 4 minutes. No, I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning." And it is stunning, particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment. It's particularly stunning to hear him make that claim in the middle of a speech that was all about the rule of law.
But we must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law. Our government was defending positions that undermine the rule of law to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
How can a president speak the kind of poetry that President Obama does about the rule of law and call for the power to indefinitely, preventively imprison people because they might commit crimes in the future? How can those two things coexist in the same man, even in the same speech? Well, that brings us to the self-consciously awkward, embarrassing part of this speech today. After condemning the Bush administration for what he called their ad hoc legal strategy for trying to make things seem legal that patently weren't, this is what President Obama proposed.
My administration has begun to reshape the standards that apply to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law. We must have clear, defensible, and lawful standards for those who fall into this category. We must have a thorough process of periodic review so that any prolonged detention is carefully evaluated and justified. Our goal is to construct a legitimate legal framework for the remaining Guantanamo detainees that cannot be transferred. Our goal is not to avoid a legitimate legal framework. In our constitutional system, prolonged detention should not be the decision of any one man. If and when we determine that the United States must hold individuals to keep them from carrying out an act of war, we will do so within a system that involves judicial and congressional oversight. And so going forward, my administration will work with Congress to develop an appropriate legal regime so that our efforts are consistent with our values and our Constitution.
You'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal. You will, what does he say? Develop an appropriate legal regime. So you can construct a whole new system outside the courts, even outside the military commissions, so that you can indefinitely imprison people without charges. And you'll build that system from scratch. What's that somebody said about ad hoc legal strategies? Just for context here, in the United Kingdom, where there isn't even a Bill of Rights, there's been a major debate about whether people can be held in preventive detention. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted 3 months to be the outer limit for how long anyone could be held. There was a big political fight about it. Parliament ended up limiting that power to 28 days. 28 days is still the longest period of preventive detention that's allowed under law in any comparable democracy anywhere in the world. How long would President Obama's proposed preventive indefinite detention last? Well, he's not saying yet, but here's how he defines the threat that he says makes indefinite detention necessary.
Right now, in distant training camps and in crowded cities, there are people plotting to take American lives. That will be the case a year from now, 5 years from now, and in all probability, 10 years from now.
10 years from now. So you could get arrested today and locked up without a trial, without being convicted, without being sentenced for, say, 10 years until the threat of your future criminal behavior passes. Prolonged detention, he's calling it. This was a beautiful speech from President Obama today with patriotic, moving, even poetic language about the rule of law and the Constitution, and one of the most radical proposals for defying the Constitution that we have ever heard made to the American people.
Some of the people that were going to the FEMA fusion centers were not to be heard or seen from again. Rescue response for Hurricane Harvey, because somebody encouraged me today to tell my story, and this is a very small piece of the story from what I witnessed on the ground, and I know that a lot of people know that I was there, involved in some of the search and rescue and some other things that were going on. And to make sure I'm not covering up my microphone. And I need to tell this story because some of these things are still going on, and they're probably going on in Florida now. And it's very important because this covers what people have considered to be conspiracy theory. It is what people have not been told in the media, and it's the kind of thing that the government and the media covers up so that people don't have an understanding of what's going on. Landed back in Texas on Sunday night and immediately got to work because the hurricane stopped on the coast and then just continued to spin, and was continuing to spin northward along the entire coast when I arrived back in Texas. And so within 24 hours of getting home, I got sleep, I obtained a boat, a truck, gas money, funding, and within 24 hours I was on the road heading from Dallas to Houston. And when I arrived in Houston, I was contacted by one of my militia brothers out of Texas, and where some of the guys were set up. I got to Houston about midnight that first night, and when I rolled through, the militia had taken over a liquor warehouse that was in basically like a strip mall. And the back of the strip mall had a fence on the back side of it, which gave them operational security because they had boundaries and borders. They took over the whole alleyway and had guys on the roof and were able to secure their position and where they were at. And I quickly found a place and we were able to bed down have a safe place. And the first thing that I noticed there, that it was like the purge. All I could hear that night was car alarms going off and glass breaking and gunshots. Luckily, I was able to bed down and get things ready and unpack my guns and ammunition, and I got zero sleep that first night. We made our way down to Katy, Texas, and when we got there, we were stopped because they had finally blocked the roads down, and we were just off of I-10 where they had FEMA, National Guard, DEA, FBI, Secret Service. They had emergency management from Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and others there. And it was a big clusterfuck of everybody sticking their thumbs up each other's asses because they were just running around like not doing anything but stroking each other, because that was happening down there. I think it's still happening down there. Some of the homeless people were freaked out. Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur had a lot of people evacuated by plane, and there was at least 1,500 that were left behind that refused to get on the FEMA planes because they said that they were not making their destinations. They were not showing up in certain areas. And those people, I don't know where they were going. The 1,500 that were there, we sent a security force over to, because they almost started rioting at the Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur because of the way they were being treated. And again, I'm going to tell people, we've talked about this for years, for fucking years. We talked about this. Don't go to the FEMA centers. This shit's very real. I just experienced it firsthand, and I've come home to decompress over these issues. 11 p.m. was scheduled to be the release of the blowing of the dam, and at least 3 of the rescuers that I talked to said that the dam had started to fail, and there was a moon-shaped spot in the top of it where water had been coming over and been washing part of the dam away. So people were saved. We rallied back at the Crossing Church, where they basically wrapped everything up for today, and they told the stories of what had been happening. At least one boat had been in another neighborhood and pulled out at least 100 people themselves from that area. And let me tell you something. These stories that you're seeing on CNN and Fox News and stuff about government officials going out on boats and pulling people in and rescuing them were designed as propaganda to let you know that the government was taking care of you, when in all actuality they were not doing evacuations. They were locking down the highways, they were locking down these neighborhoods, and they were going to flood these people in their homes. But if you hear part of the background story of what was actually going on down there, then it brings credence to those who put out some of these theories because they have read the FEMA papers, or they have read the government documents into these things. And what has brought this up today for me to finally discuss this openly is the fact that FEMA is trying to put their prison ships out at Port Arthur, Texas, to give a place for people to live because their homes have been destroyed or whatever. I later found out that even though we were stopped at this FEMA resource center and this government makeshift resource center at the mall, and let me tell you, and you'll get part of this out of my story, that they do use malls, they do use Walmart, they do use these other places to set up FEMA and to create FEMA centers in these natural disasters. I saw it firsthand. Some of the people that were going to the FEMA fusion centers were not to be heard or seen from again. I got the rundown from the militia that night about other things that were going on, and I couldn't talk about it at the time because of operational security. But now I'm in the Ozark Mountains. I'm back in Missouri for a minute, and I'm in a little better place to actually be able to tell this story. I do have some pictures and some videos to verify some of the things that I'm talking about, or the fact that I was even there. For the most part, I didn't get to videotape a lot of the things that I wanted to because of security at the time, and because of on Facebook and social media, I was talking about supplies and helping out people, but the very reality of the fact was I was using those boats and I was using those people and those supplies to make sure that armed militia were going in. And I believe wholeheartedly that we stopped a gun confiscation, and we stopped them from murdering a lot of people. And the only reason why Hurricane Harvey was not Katrina was because of the Cajun Navy, the Texas Navy, and the response from Texans on their own soil that was saving tens of thousands of lives that I witnessed firsthand, while the government was locking down roads and barricading people from being able to help. Within 24 hours, I had more than $50,000 to $100,000 worth of supplies showing up on trucks, along with over 100 armed men and women and medics and corpsmen and people who are not your bullshit militia spouting keyboard warriors that you see on the internet all the time. These are guys who are hardcore motherfuckers that were ready to go in to these little towns and these neighborhoods where they were not doing evacuations, that they were flooding and preparing. FEMA and other people were flooding these small towns without doing evacuations and didn't care if people were dying. See, when you have something like a disaster happen, like a hurricane, and many of us have talked about shit hit the fan in our YouTube videos for many years and about preparedness, and it's very important to know that within the first couple days of one of these disasters, that money doesn't matter anymore. What does matter, water, food, ammunition, guns, and the things that you're going to need for survival. By the time I was told that we needed to disarm, I had at least 40 people there armed. AKs, ARs, sidearms, and I started putting a plan together, and I'll just put it this way. I called Murdoch Pisgatti, the president of my organization, on the last day, which I'm going to get to this in a minute, and I told him, I've been busted, and I got to tell you what I was doing, because it might come back on you, because you're the one sending me aid down here. But I was not just trying to put boats in the water. I was not just trying to bring supplies and aid in from other parts of Texas and across the country. What I was doing is I was using the old tactic that we see the government using and saying that we were doing humanitarian aid runs. But on those humanitarian aid runs of ships full of food and medical supplies, I was putting at least 4 to 5 armed men or women, team members in boats to get them over into the Golden and Vidor areas and the Port Arthur areas, so that we had armed militia in those areas to protect Texans and also help pull them out. The private contractors came in, tried to disarm us, tried to take over our supplies, and I wasn't having any of it. The guy that was working with me hand in hand started carrying around an ice pick because the contractor had threatened his life, and he was ready to stab this guy in his neck because he straight up threatened our lives. I had my .357 on my hip the whole time that I was there, and this contractor was talking to us about open carrying and scaring people, but the real reality is they were trying to control the situation and take over for whatever reason, supplies, and to get those armed men out of there. And he tried to take my 357 off my hip, in which case my retention skills that I've done, whether the open carry movement or my training in other areas I'm not going to talk about, I put my elbow directly on my gun as soon as he tried to grab it, smacked his arm away, and had to inform him I was going to shoot him in his head if he tried to touch my gun again, because they were trying to take over and threaten our operation of protecting Texans, so that they could get away with whatever they were getting away with. Hiding bodies, covering up things that were going on. Some of the neighborhoods that those guys were going into were the richest neighborhoods and were involved in, I believe, government looting or private contractor looting. So we slept in the back corner of the pastor's office that night. And the next morning, we had already had everything set up, and we got up and we sent everybody out in 8 to 10 different directions where they couldn't be followed. And they went to their respective places, to these small towns in these areas, and we got the supplies there. We got the armed militia into these areas to protect Texans, and they continued that as I left town and went back to Dallas. My mission at that point in time, after 5 days, was basically over, and I left and got out of the area. The first night that I was there, we had at least one team that was not part of the militia. They were there, I think, as adjutants, and I personally heard them talking about hunting people. And there were people down there that were hunting people. They were not hunting deer, they were not hunting boar, they were not hunting pigs, they were hunting people. I think some of them believe that they were hunting looters, but as I said earlier, after a day or two of being in shit at the fan in a situation where there's no water, no food, your most moralistic person might go into your neighbor's house and try and find food and water for survival. So at this point in time, you have people who aren't necessarily looters, but people who are just trying to survive, and if they looked like looters, they were being shot. They were hunting people. By that night, I had 100 to 150 very tacked out armed teams ready to protect Texans. Ready to go into these small towns and these neighborhoods and make sure that people were not getting locked in, make sure they were getting aid coming into them, and making sure that the government was not allowing people to be killed, whether it was by the release of these dams and the flooding for a second time, not from the hurricane, but they were flooding these areas for a second time. And my security guy informed me that what they were doing was basically flushing the toilet on Port Arthur, and the bodies that they had seen from the hurricane, whether they were full of bullet holes or whether they were just flood victims, were not there during the second flooding. They had not been collected, they were being washed out to sea. Those bodies are not being recorded in the body counts that are happening down there. And now that FEMA and National Guard took over and suspended all rescue operations, people are, they're bringing in prison ships. And I'm going to tell you right now, do not get on their fucking prison ships, because you might not come back. They're allowing the sharks and the fish to eat the bodies that go out to sea, just like they did in Hurricane Katrina. And with millions of people being displaced from their homes and their neighborhoods, you might go missing forever, and they think that you just bugged out and went somewhere else in the country and can't find you. But a lot of these people are going out to sea and never coming back. I was told by the militia guys that they had worked with federal agents at the ATF to secure many of the gun stores in the area, because they were very worried about how many gun stores Houston has, and they wanted to make sure that the gangs weren't breaking in and taking these guns out and being able to use them. And we met up with the Cajun and Texas Navy guys. when I got to the Woodlands, I think it was called the Crossing Church in the Woodlands is where they were set up. I could tell they had a very well put together rescue mission going on with lots of computers and maps and other things, and they were dispatching people to many different locations in different areas. The guys that were running this were obviously pros at what they were doing, and obviously had connections with many other people, because as soon as they gave us a chance to get our boats out there and start going on rescue missions, we heard that there was some really bad looting going on. One of the stories that we heard of was like Grand Theft Auto. Somebody was on a jet ski with pistols in both hands, firing their guns into people's homes in the Katy area. And DPS showed up. That's Department of Public Safety. For those of you who don't understand, that is basically the Highway Patrol of Texas. And they were putting a DPS agent on every boat and every car going out to do these rescues. The DPS agent that rode with me for several hours was a member of CID, which is Criminal Investigation Detectives or Criminal Investigation Units, and they wanted to make sure that we had our guns with us. So I had a Highway Patrol chick in my car as we were dispatched to go out, and was told to grab my AK-47 and have my pistol on my hip because of what they were involved in. Now, at the time, I didn't realize why DPS was being put on every boat and every truck. We later found out that the reason DPS was with us and wanted to make sure we were armed was because at least one of those gun stores had been taken over, and there was some pretty hardcore gang members that were using the arms that they had gotten to go and loot and rob people. They were stealing boats from people in the Cajun Texas Navy. They were dressing up like rescuers, and when people would answer their door to get rescued, they were robbing them and going in their homes. There were people that were being shot and murdered. And they put the DPS agents and detectives on our boats and on our cars because they were hunting gang members. Like I said, the immediate hours and few days after a disaster, it's lawlessness, it's shit at the fan, and there is no law and order, and things get crazy. And that's another reason why you want to be prepared and have arms in your home and everywhere else. Told these federal agents to get out of their way because they were going in to save Texans. Everybody went home for the night and got some rest, and were scheduled to come back at sunrise to go again. And by the time we got back the next morning, they started dispatching people to the Beaumont-Port Arthur area. That is when a member of the State Department came in, and basically he laid it out like this: we don't want to have a war zone, we need to get people in there to do rescues. They're not allowing anybody to get into this area, so you're going to follow me. It's normally an hour drive. It's going to take us 4 hours to get there because the roads are so flooded that we have to go on all these different county roads and back ways to get there. So we followed this member of the State Department under, he led at least 30 trucks and boats to the Beaumont area. When we get to Beaumont, we get past all of the roadblocks, we get past everything, and we show up at a church. And then he filled us in on what was going on, and they called it Templar 1. That was the mission we were on, was Templar 1. So we go from there, and the pastor prays over us, and we go out from that spot. And we head over to the local Walmart and Academy store where they were setting up the FEMA Fusion Center and makeshift hospital, and they had a helipad there to be able to do rescues and stuff. So they were using the Walmart stores, and they were using the parking lots there and stuff. There were already lines lining up at the Walmart stores that were at least 2 miles long, and people were being rationed 1 case of water, 1 loaf of bread. It was very socialistically done. This is how FEMA works things. They don't always give people what they need. They just give them little pieces here and there. And it's done in a systematically government-controlled socialistic way. And basically there was bread lines forming, and that's exactly what was happening there at that FEMA center. We rallied there and met up with some other first responders, where we finally took another convoy down into the downtown Beaumont area on a very crazy ride, where we had people on the highway trying to break up our convoy and trying to wreck into our cars, and we're pulling boats. Like, this is not the best thing for us to be involved in, with people trying to run us off the road while we're in a convoy. But there was obviously people that were trying to break up the convoy. I was able to keep it close to the head of the line of the civilians that were involved in this operation and bringing boats in, because they didn't have the resources to do what they needed to do. It was such a wide destruction area. We get into downtown Beaumont, and we station in this big parking lot in the middle of downtown, and this is where the State Department official rallied us all together, and he said, "I'm not here. I was never here. I never got you guys in here. But now you're on your own, and here's the scenario. They're getting ready to release the dam here, and within the next hour, you're going to be under 4 foot of water. Find high ground, you're on your own." They left us there to die. They left us there to drown. They didn't give any more information than that. And a bunch of the people in our crews, including police and veterans, are the ones that lost their minds, because they didn't have direction and they didn't have anybody give them confirmation on what they were supposed to do, and so they started freaking out. So we started setting up shop. Half the veterans and police freaked out and decided they wanted to go to the local Holiday Inn so they'd have beds and showers and stuff. The other half of us stayed at the church and started putting together basically our own fusion center. And this fusion center that we put together in 48 hours, we put together a small medic hospital. We had nurses, militia, and other people there. And we were not taking in refugees. This was only for search and rescue. And I immediately started using my resources with Don't Comply and the Open Carry movement and militia and other people that I know across the board to start bringing in supplies. What I was not telling people on social media was the fact that we were also warned by these guys that they were getting ready to do gun confiscations on the Texas coast in Beaumont and Port Arthur. They had already been having lots of looting and lots of they were having gunfights. There were people being murdered. Our guys started bringing in reports of lots of bodies being in the water. And the body count that's being talked about in Texas is not in the 60s. It's probably more like in the thousands. Because they didn't recover any of these bodies before they released the water from the dam. So what happened was, when they released the water from the dam, those bodies were being washed out to sea. And my security advisor that was there as I was putting together our own militia fusion center was giving me reports back from their boats and from the people that were in the water of bodies that they were seeing with bullet holes in them. They would simply tag these bodies around their ankle or around their wrist and leave them in the water, because when you're in a search and rescue, it's a biohazard to bring a dead body onto your boat, and you basically GPS mark where they're at, and later on they can be recovered after the flooding, because we were there to pull out live bodies out of the water and out of these neighborhoods. But what I was told by local officials and by the State Department official that was there with us was that they were going to be doing gun confiscations because of the violence that had been happening in that area. And I think we all know from Katrina and other things that gun confiscations not only is not going to fucking happen in Texas, it's not going to happen again because of life safety, because of life safety. By the next morning, I had trucks and militia rolling in. So now we're going into the 4th or 5th day that I was down there. I was only sleeping about an hour a night, just enough to, not be in sleep deprivation and being able to keep my mind sane. And by the afternoon, I had probably about 75 armed men and women, not including the ones that were already out in the water doing rescues, and was continuing to make the call for supplies. So we had about $50,000 to $100,000 worth of supplies show up in the form of medical supplies, food, water, and all these different things. 100 to 150 very tacked out, very capable armed militiamen. And these, like I said, these are not the people that you see bullshitting on the internet. These are actual 3%ers that showed up and were about it and ready to go. About 3 o'clock in the morning on the last night that I was there, private contractors showed up, and they were very angry about some of the things that were going on. They demanded I hand over those supplies and I disperse my men and women that were there for the safety of Texans. And I refused. And I told him very strictly to his face that you're not going to tell me to disarm. I've been a part of the open carry movement. I was PR director of a very large organization, and if he was going to threaten me in that manner, I would make a very quick phone call and make sure that 1,000 armed people showed up and were ready to continue the job that we were doing. So I started making a call out for supplies. My call out for supplies was not just for supplies, and the people that I'm involved with understand that I needed armed men there. We were approached by local officials who, the police and others, who told us that we were not allowed to have guns, we were not allowed to be armed while we were there, and that they were going to come and take our guns and not allow us to be a part of that. So those of you who don't understand right now, there is a civil war happening in this country, and I saw it firsthand on the Texas coast. There are federal officials who were there who were wanting to lock down roads and wanting to wash these bodies out to sea, and there were government officials there that were supporting us in the life safety of saving Texans' lives, pulling them out of their neighborhoods and making sure that they were getting supplies and safety and medical attention. And there were those who were trying to control the situation and lock it down. That first night that I was there, I was doing everything I could to use this facility that we had, and I had realized that the dam that they were releasing was one river over from us, and had the flooding come over to our area, it was going to hit this other river and was still going to wash out to Port Arthur. So I knew we were on dry ground. I knew we were in a safe location. We started setting up shop there. Half of our guys left, ended up chasing their tails for the night, because you can't always put your boats into the raging flood waters. It'll wash your boat out, and it's not safe unless you have the right size motor. But the right size motor for those situations in 4 foot of water with cars and debris and everything else is not the ideal situation. You'll wreck your boat, you'll capsize, and you'll be stuck in the flood waters and become somebody who needs to be rescued also. Taking over supply routes and supply chains of Texans who were sending aid and sending people, and they were confiscating it. And like I said in the beginning of the video, it was, I think half of it was because there were people there to do bad deeds, and I think there were people there who, instead of being caught up in that would rather lock the roads down and not let you get cameras in and not let you get the stories out so that it doesn't look bad on their record when it comes down. They were allowing bodies to be washed out to sea because it's better to let that happen and then be missing persons instead of another body count on their local county or their area. After about 72 hours of not having water or food, somebody who is highly moralistic, like a pastor or somebody, would very quickly resort to robbery or theft or hurting somebody else to make sure that they had a way to live. You go back to your carnal nature of survival. I've been through a lot of things, even with the open carry movement, that have risked my life over the years, but I'm already a dead man. And I know I'm going to die one day, and my soul's redeemed, so it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is doing the right thing and letting people know what's actually going on.